NieR Automata has probably got to be one of the most misleading games I've ever played. But that's not a bad thing. I bought the game thinking it was going to be one of those good time hack and slash games, kind of like Devil May Cry. Don't get me wrong, that is included in the package, but the game is so much more. Now, I think it's a good time to mention that I'm going to try and avoid any real spoilers in this video, because this game is an experience and I don't want to take it away from anyone. Anyway, the game has the aforementioned aspects I mentioned before, but it is also probably one of the most philosophical and thought-provoking games I've played to date. If you told me that I'd buy this game and come out of it crying like a little bitch, I wouldn't believe you. Except I kinda did come out of it crying like a little bitch, so there's that. NieR Automata is an action RPG and was published by our friends over at Square Enix. It was released in 2017, which mind you was a great year for gaming, like holy hell. We got NieR, Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Resident Evil 7, Xenoblade 2, Sonic Mania, and that's barely scratching the surface. Back to NieR though. The brainwaves of the great Yoko Taro brought this game to us. Who was Yoko Taro, you may ask? Well, you uncultured swine.
こんにちは、ディレクターの横尾です。NieR Automata T シャツ、NieR Automata T シャツ、NieR Automata T シャツ、NieR Automata T シャツ、Square Enix!
Simply put, he's kind of a god amongst men. NieR Automata is actually a sequel to NieR Replicant or Gestalt, depending on your region, which is a spin-off of the Drakengard game, specifically a joke ending from Drakengard 1, which you wouldn't know unless you did some research, because how the hell are you even supposed to tell? Speaking of prequels, NieR Replicant just came out like a couple weeks close to this video, so I'd highly suggest you pick it up and show your support for the franchise. Anyway, despite all the prequels, Automata is a good starting point. But now that Replicant is out, and it's a lot easier to access, I suggest you doing that route first. The themes of this game are pretty prominent in the opening line.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
Basically, the plot of this game follows a huge proxy war fought by the machines and the other machines, but they're called androids, but isn't that basically a type of machine? I don't know. But yeah, it's a proxy war because the androids are fighting for their human creators, while the machines are fighting for their alien creators. So we follow 2B and NieR on what we're told is a scouting mission to find information on a possible giant kaiju enemy. Oh yeah, this game has kaiju fights. That's pretty cool. They meet up, kick some shit, and then fight the big kaiju guy. On another note, I really love how this is done. You actually walk on the boss as a platform before you even realize it. It's a really good use of space and applies a sense of scale. It's really cool. Back to the fight. NieR gets his shit kicked and 2B goes to save him. And I mean, that's kind of weird how she cares so much about someone she just met, don't you think? But I'm not going to go further into detail because that's like spoiler territory. But it's a good example of how the game eventually connects dots. After the big fight, 2B and NieR are kind of screwed, so they commit Daft Punk and blow themselves up. Luckily for them, NieR was able to back up all 2B's memories, and this is where the game really begins. A lot of this game's overall story focuses on a lot of philosophies and kind of puts a unique spin on each one. For instance, there are a bunch of machines you find throughout the game, whether it be side quests or the main story, that are named after famous philosophers in our history. Some notable names come from Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, among others. I probably butchered those names, I am so sorry. There's a major overarching philosophy that I probably won't touch on just to avoid spoilers, but just know that it really does make you, as the player, think about not only the character's choices, but also your own personal choices and life decisions. Yeah, it goes there. For context, Automata was developed by Platinum Games, which means the gameplay is pretty damn action-oriented. You know, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising type stuff. You've got two attack buttons. The main one for primary weapon attacks, and the second one for secondary weapon attacks. It's crazy, I know. Match these buttons together and you get some pretty damn good combos. Weapons range from small swords to big boy swords to even your bare fists if you're a badass. You can also hit a button to dodge and evade. Hitting it at the perfect time will allow you to do a follow-up that can launch enemies around or lower than your level. Real satisfying shit. If you manage to get an enemy to low health and stun them, 2B can perform a finisher move.
Fuck off!
These finisher moves can completely knock out the enemy and does damage to surrounding ones, so they're always pretty effective to use when you get the opportunity to use one. Now, you may have noticed this little pod flying around me. This little guy actually adds a lot more depth to the combat system. With the press of a button, The pod fires off energy balls that deal small damage to an enemy, and it can rapid fire, so you can chip off some good damage that adds on to your regular attacks. It's also pretty efficient to use against flying enemies or enemies too far away for physical combat. What I've just covered is 2B's main method of attack. However, when you play as a best boy 9S over there are some slight variations to the gameplay. He still has the same basic attacks as 2B with the dodge counter. However, he can only equip one weapon at a time. This limits his overall combo game and makes his physical combat inferior to 2B. But 9S has a little something up his sleeve, if you know what I mean. That little something? Holding down what would usually be the secondary weapon button at an enemy allows 9S to hack them. Once hacked, it opens up a retro-style top-down shooter. In order to successfully complete the hack, you gotta blow up the enemy's balls. And once that's done, you're back to the fight and given the option to either blow up the enemy or take remote control of some enemies. Depending on the type of enemy, these minigames are either super easy and they get kinda difficult. And while the small enemies will die after one hack, the bigger enemies take larger chunks of chip damage. If you're good and you know what you're doing, you can take care of the big son of a bitches without throwing a sword. I should mention now that both 2B and 9S have a last resort kind of move. They both have access to a self-destruct command that causes a huge explosion. Now, what I think the initial purpose of this feature was is to clear out a large group of enemies if you're in a pinch. However, I can promise you that 99.9% of the population does not use the self-destruct feature for this purpose. No, there's something else that it's used for that may be seen as a bit more important, if you catch my drift. Anyway, back on track. We're not done with the gameplay styles just yet, as there's another big one. It's actually the first gameplay style we're introduced to, and that's the flight segments. Kinda similar in terms of the hacking minigames, but I'd say a lot more in depth. The flight units have two forms, the jet mode and the cool ass
Mecha mode.
The flight units move around on their own scripted sequences, but you have to destroy the enemies to make sure you stay alive. Switching between the two modes is scripted yet again, but these flight modes aren't super common and don't overstay their welcome. So it's a fun little side mode that keeps you on your toes as you experience story happening right in front of you. Now you may be thinking to yourself,
Wow, that's a lot of gameplay styles. Surely there's nothing else they could have packed into this game.
Wrong.
what if I told you this game is also a text adventure? Because why not? Jokes aside, the text adventures are all really good and probably some of the most moving parts of this game. Holy hell, I love reading through each one. Music really helps add emotion to the texts you read, so yeah. Added bonus. They're probably the least common from all the gameplay styles, but that's not inherently a bad thing. Super impactful towards the lore and your emotions as a whole. Speaking of music, seamless transition! I like to consider myself a bit of a music connoisseur, and let me tell you, NieR Automata is not only one of the best video game soundtracks of all time, but I could also even compare it to the best movie soundtracks of all time. That's how good it is. I've been playing the OST throughout this video, so hopefully you yourself have come to the conclusion that, hey, this stuff is actually really good. The music ranges from real somber stuff, to stuff that'll pump you up with adrenaline, and stuff that'll make you bawl your eyes out. Needless to say, there's a lot of diversity when it comes to the soundtrack, all of it being really welcome. Fun fact about the music, apart from like 2 songs that change language depending on your region, every other vocal track in the game is a completely unique language that isn't actually real. Apparently it's based on Gaelic, and kind of just mixes a bunch of languages together to create a brand new language. The music also shifts depending on the current situation. Once you run into combat, more instruments begin to kick in the background, and it allows for a natural feeling of intensity. It's pretty damn effective. Throughout the game, you're gonna run into a multitude of different machine enemy types. You've got your small guys, your gun guys, your flying guys, your dog guys, your kangaroo jacks, your big guys, your really big guys, and your tank guys as just a few examples. There's also these worm guys, but holy shit, they make me lose my fucking mind. With 9S's mind hack shit, they're not that bad. But trying to land on multiple hits with 2B at specific spots while fighting multiple of these bastards makes me want to grab my fucking console and throw it out of a 50-story building. Enemies you beat will drop these plug-in chips that you can use to upgrade your skills and abilities. Using them in the right way makes things a breeze, which is especially useful in harder difficulties and against harder bosses. Chips can raise your stats, make you faster, and allow yourself to self-heal and auto-use items. They vary pretty drastically. When implementing plug-in chips, you have a limited amount of space you can use, and just like real-life storage, there are certain parts of space that you can't exchange without removing important features. But man, the actual designs of both the characters and the world is both really unique and really pretty to boot, especially YouTube. So obviously, this is a war-ridden, post-apocalyptic world. But what's interesting is that what they do with this concept. You could have just gone with the destroyed city and called it a day, but they put a bunch of different things together and it works really well. Every area of the map is connected, with no loading screens in sight unless you quick travel across the map. Of course, you've got your destroyed city, but you can also find yourself in an abandoned mall, an old castle grounds covered in lush jungle, a harsh desert covering what was once an apartment complex, and what is probably my favourite, a once abandoned carnival that has been reanimated by the machines building their homes there. The character designs also have significance. Who would have guessed? The ground units such as 2B and 9S wear these interesting masks that cover their face, while the navigators up in command cover their mouths. This is a see no evil, speak no evil kind of thing, because this game is once again centered around philosophies and stuff. Very smart, very philosophical, very monkey. In general though, 2B and 9S have really distinct designs. I especially love how the black and white contrast is very nice. Along with the main story throughout the game, you'll find yourself discovering side quests all over the world. Whether they come from other androids or even machines, each one will have you complete a task for another person. Typical side quest stuff. However, what makes these side quests different from most games is that every single one has world building. That's right, every side quest introduces characters or themes that help develop the world of the game that it finds itself in. Whether it be lighthearted, sad, or even sometimes unnerving, each one is integral if you want to know everything there is to know about the world of Automata. You'll get a lot more interactions between characters in the world with these side quests, and they can actually link back to plotlines that happened in the Drakengard series and NieR Replicant. NieR Automata has multiple endings, one for each letter of the alphabet to be precise. Yeah, you heard me right, 26 different endings. Now to be fair, a large portion of these endings are joke endings that you can discover for yourself throughout the game. However, endings A, B, C, D, and E respectively are canon, and you'll want to get all of them to experience the whole story. I gotta be honest here, I really can't find too much to complain about. If I were to nitpick about anything, it'd be that the first two playthroughs are mostly similar, with some slight gameplay changes and some added tidbits to the lore, but it really isn't that big of a deal. As someone who loves story-driven games, Automata does wonders for me, and it has enough action and grand set pieces to keep me engaged throughout. Like, no spoilers, but the ending is like, wowee man, just... But yeah, overall, NieR Automata is a very strong game that has a message it wants to shoot, and I gotta say, it lands pretty hard. The combination of really strong characters and a gripping, thought-provoking narrative ends up working wonders, and it's left a huge impact on not only me, but a large majority of the people who have actively played the game. Hey guys, if you've made it this far, I'm really appreciative. This is my first big project that I've worked on, and it's taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to. But it was a fun journey, I enjoyed it. If you did like it, and you're still here, so I'm assuming you did, leaving a like and a subscribe will just help tremendously, because I'm trying to get this channel off the ground, and I really appreciate it, so thank you. Thanks again for sticking around, I appreciate it.